The gun was pointed at her chest before she even finished reaching for her wallet. "Hands where I can see them," the officer barked, his voice cracking with adrenaline. "Now." Denise Carver kept her palms flat against the steering wheel, fingers spread wide, the metal hot from the Georgia sun beating through the windshield. Her heart hammered, but her voice stayed level. "Officer, I am not reaching for a weapon. I am reaching for my credentials. I am a federal agent." "Federal agent," he sneered, stepping closer, weapon still raised, hand trembling with something between fear and fury. "Lady, I've heard every excuse in the book. Get out of the car, slowly." Behind him, the dash cam light blinked red. Behind her, on the passenger seat, her phone screen had already gone dark, but not before it had done exactly what it was designed to do. 2 minutes later, everything about this stop would change forever. But to understand how a routine Tuesday afternoon on a cracked stretch of Highway 9 turned into the worst day of Officer Wade Corrigan's career, we have to go back 6 hours. It started with a phone call that woke Denise up at 5 in the morning. Her mother had fallen again. Nothing broken this time, just bruised, just scared. Just another reminder that 81 years catches up to a person whether they're ready or not. Denise had been 3 states away, working a wire fraud case out of the Atlanta field office, buried in surveillance logs and bank records, when her sister's voice cracked through the phone. "She's asking for you, Denise. She keeps asking for you." So Denise did what she always did. She packed a duffel bag, left her badge case in her jacket pocket instead of her bag because habit told her never to be without it, and got in her car. Not a bureau vehicle. Her own car, a 12-year-old gray Honda Accord with a dent in the rear bumper from a hit-and-run in a parking garage 2 years back. Cloth seats worn soft from years of long drives. An air freshener shaped like a pine tree hanging dead and scentless from the mirror. She hadn't slept. She was wearing gray sweatpants, an old FBI Academy hoodie with a coffee stain on the sleeve, and sneakers with no socks. Her hair was pulled back in a loose knot. She looked like a tired woman driving too fast on too little sleep, because that's exactly what she was. That was the whole point. Nobody driving past her on Highway 9 that afternoon would have guessed that the exhausted-looking black woman behind the wheel of the dented Honda was a 12-year veteran of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a specialist in civil rights and public corruption cases. Someone who had spent the last 4 months quietly gathering information about a pattern of unlawful stops in 3 counties along this very corridor. She wasn't in Caldwell County for that investigation. Not today. Today she was just a daughter trying to get to her mother's bedside before visiting hours ended. The town of Caldwell sat where the pine forests gave way to flat farmland, a place of gas stations with faded signs, churches with white steeples, and a 2-block downtown that still had its original brick storefronts, half of them empty. The heat that day sat heavy and wet, the kind that made the asphalt shimmer and the cicadas scream from the tree line. Denise had grown up 2 counties over, in a house with a tin roof that rattled every time it rained, raised by a mother who cleaned houses for a living and a father who drove a delivery truck until his knees gave out. Nobody in her family had ever worn a badge before her. She remembered the first time she told her mother she'd been accepted into the Bureau's training academy at Quantico, how her mother had gone quiet for a long moment before saying, simply, "Be careful out there, baby. They don't always see us the way we see ourselves." She had carried that sentence with her through 12 years of field work, through violent crime task forces and public corruption cases, and eventually into the Civil Rights Division, where she had built a reputation for being meticulous, patient, and impossible to rattle. She thought about her mother now as the pines blurred past the window, exhaustion pulling at the corners of her eyes, the radio murmuring low. She thought about the years it had taken to earn the badge in her jacket pocket, and how strange it was that, on this particular afternoon driving toward a hospital bed, instead of a crime scene. She was simply a tired daughter in a dented car, no different in appearance from any other woman making the same worn, familiar drive. Denise had been driving for 4 hours straight, windows cracked, radio low, when she saw the lights flash red and blue in her rearview mirror. She didn't panic. She had been trained not to. She checked her speed, 41 in a 45, well under the limit, checked her mirrors, and eased the Honda onto the gravel shoulder, dust rising in a soft brown cloud around the tires. She rolled her window down halfway and waited, hands resting visibly on the wheel, the way she had told 100 witnesses to do in 100 different interviews over the years. Stay calm. Stay visible. Don't give anyone a reason to be afraid of you. The officer who approached her window walked with the kind of swagger that came from being the biggest authority in a small place for a long time. Broad shoulders, sunglasses pushed up on his buzzed head, a hand resting on his belt just above his holster. His name tag read Corrigan. License and registration, he said, not a greeting, just an order. Of course, officer, Denise said, keeping her voice easy, unhurried. Can I ask what the reason for the stop is? Tag's not coming back right in the system, he said. Sit tight. It was a lie. Denise knew it was a lie the moment he said it because her registration was current, renewed 3 months earlier, and because she had already noticed the pattern in his approach. The way he'd looked at her before he looked at her plate. The way his jaw had tightened the second he saw her face through the window. She handed over her license anyway. Calm, cooperative, watching. Corrigan walked back to his cruiser slowly, taking his time, the kind of slow that was meant to make a person sweat. Denise didn't sweat. She waited, watching the side mirror, watching the way he lingered by his open door longer than any tag check required. When he came back, his posture had changed. Looser, more confident. The kind of confident that came from deciding, somewhere in that cruiser, exactly how this stop was going to go. Step out of the vehicle. May I ask why? Denise said, still even, still calm, though something cold had started to settle in her stomach. I said step out of the vehicle. Now. She complied, opening the door slowly, keeping her hands visible the entire time, standing on the gravel shoulder in her sweatpants and stained hoodie while cars slowed on the highway to look, then sped back up, unwilling to get involved. This your car? Corrigan asked, circling her, studying the dented bumper, the faded paint. Yes, sir. You sure about that? Because a car like this and a woman like you driving alone through here, you understand why I might have questions. There it was. The words hung in the thick afternoon air, and Denise understood exactly what kind of stop this had become. Not about a tag, not about a tail light, about her. She kept her face still. I understand you have a job to do, officer. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. You always this calm when you're being pulled over? He asked, a smirk pulling at the corner of his mouth, like her composure was an insult, like her refusal to flinch was somehow proof of guilt. I try to be respectful, she said simply. He didn't like that answer. Men like Corrigan rarely did. Respect that didn't come wrapped in fear felt to someone like him like defiance. Where are you headed in such a hurry? To see my mother. She's in the hospital in Brantley County. That's so. He didn't believe her. It was written plainly across his face, the particular expression of a man who had already decided the story before he'd heard it, and now was simply waiting for the facts to catch up to his conclusion. He asked for her insurance card again, even though she'd already handed it over. He asked her to explain the dent in her bumper. He asked why a woman dressed like that was driving a car registered 3 counties over. Every question was a small, unfair thing, a pebble dropped into still water, and Denise answered each one clearly, patiently, without a single crack in her composure. That composure was exactly what began to unravel him. You think you're smarter than me, he said finally, dropping the pretense of routine procedure entirely. I can see it. That little calm act. I've seen it before. I'm not trying to be anything other than cooperative, Officer Corrigan. Don't say my name like you know me. It's on your uniform." His jaw tightened. Somewhere behind his sunglasses, Denise could see the exact moment his ego decided it had been challenged one too many times. "Turn around. Hands on the vehicle. You're being detained." "On what grounds?" "Grounds are whatever I say they are out here, sweetheart." That was the moment Denise decided it was time. She kept her hands visible, moving with the slow, deliberate calm of someone who had trained for exactly this kind of moment more times than she could count. "Officer, I need to inform you that I am a federal law enforcement officer. My credentials are in my jacket's inside pocket. I am going to reach for them slowly." Corrigan barked out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Federal officer, right, in sweatpants. I'm off duty. I was driving to see my sick mother. I'm still going to show you my credentials because I believe once you see them, this can end peacefully." "You reach into that jacket," he said, hand moving to his holster, "and I will assume you're reaching for a weapon." "I am not armed, officer. I am going to move slowly." She did. Two fingers, careful, deliberate, drawing out a slim leather case and flipping it open to reveal the gold and blue shield, the photo ID beneath it, her name and title printed in unmistakable federal typeface. Special Agent Denise R. Carver, Federal Bureau of Investigation. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The cicadas kept screaming in the pines. A truck rumbled past on the highway, and Officer Wade Corrigan looked at the badge in her hand and did something that would define the rest of his career. He laughed. "You've got to be kidding me," he said, shaking his head, a short, ugly sound of contempt. "You think I haven't seen fake badges before? You can buy that on the internet for $30. It's not fake, officer. I'd encourage you to call it in. My credential number is right there. Dispatch can verify it in under a minute. I'm not calling anything in based on some prop you're waving at me." His voice had risen now, loud enough that a woman pumping gas at the station across the road turned to look. "Put it away, hands on the car. Officer Corrigan, I strongly advise you to verify my identity before this goes any further." I said hands on the car. "You people always got something to say," Corrigan muttered, more to himself than to her, the words slipping out the way ugly thoughts do when a person stops bothering to filter them. "Always got a story." "I don't have a story, officer. I have a badge and a name you can verify in under a minute." "Verify," he repeated, like the word tasted wrong in his mouth. "You know how many people try to talk their way out of a stop by claiming to be somebody important. It's always something." "I understand you've heard excuses before," Denise said, keeping her tone level, almost gentle, the way she had once talked down a hostile witness with nothing but the steadiness of her own voice. "This isn't one. Call it in, please." For a moment, something flickered behind his sunglasses. Hesitation. The barest crack of doubt. Then his radio crackled with another unit checking his status, asking if he needed assistance, and something about being questioned in front of an unseen audience hardened him right back into certainty. "Put it away," he snapped. "I'm not standing here while you talk circles around me. Hands on the car. Last time I'm asking." "Officer Corrigan, please listen. I am complying. I am not resisting. Everything happening right now is being recorded by your own body camera." That should have stopped him. In another version of this afternoon, it would have. But Wade Corrigan had spent 9 years on this stretch of highway, building a reputation among his colleagues as the officer who never let anyone talk their way out of anything. And that reputation had become, over time, something closer to an identity than a job. Backing down now in front of a dash cam, a body cam, and whatever invisible authority this woman claimed to represent, felt to him like erasing himself. And that was the moment he drew his weapon. It came up fast, the barrel catching a flash of afternoon sun, his hand shaking with the particular tremor of a man who had let his fear and his pride tangle themselves into something dangerous. Denise froze, not from panic, but from the trained stillness of someone who understood that sudden movement in front of a frightened man with a gun was how tragedies happened. "Hands where I can see them," he shouted. Now, this was the moment. This was the exact instant the story had opened on, the barrel raised, the badge still in her outstretched hand, the dust settling around them on the gravel shoulder of Highway 9. But what Officer Corrigan didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that 30 seconds earlier, while reaching slowly for her credentials, Denise had done something else with the same motion. Bureau training had drilled a single instinct into every agent who carried a phone in the field. When a stop turns hostile, when a weapon is drawn or threatened, there is a sequence, a code phrase built into standard radio protocol and mirrored in the Bureau's mobile duress application. That can be triggered with nothing more than a specific tap pattern on a locked screen. She had triggered it the moment his hand moved toward his holster. It did not make a sound. It did not light up or vibrate in a way he could notice. It simply sent a silent, encrypted distress signal to the Atlanta field office, tagged with her badge number, her GPS coordinates, and a priority code reserved for agents in imminent danger. Corrigan didn't know that. All he knew was that the woman in front of him wasn't flinching the way he expected her to. "On the ground," he shouted. "Get on the ground. Officer, I am unarmed and I am fully cooperating. Escalating further will only make this worse for you." "Worse for me?" His laugh was sharp, disbelieving. "You're the one on the ground in about 5 seconds. He grabbed her arm, wrenching it hard enough that she staggered and forced her down onto the gravel, knee pressing between her shoulder blades, cuffs biting into her wrists. Small stones dug into her palms. The heat of the asphalt radiated up into her cheek. Somewhere above her she heard him keying his radio. "Dispatch, I've got a subject resisting, claims to be federal law enforcement, presented what I believe to be a fraudulent badge, requesting backup." He was already building his story, already shaping the version of events he would tell his supervisor, his union rep, maybe someday a jury. Resisting. Fraudulent. The words of a man laying groundwork for a lie before the truth had even finished happening. Denise, face against warm gravel, wrists locked in steel, said nothing more. She didn't need to. She had done everything training and 12 years of experience told her to do. Now it was simply a matter of time. It took 4 minutes and 11 seconds. That was how long it took from the moment the silent alarm reached the watch desk at the Atlanta field office to the moment the first black SUV crested the rise on Highway 9, lights flashing, followed by a second. Then a Caldwell County Sheriff's Supervisor vehicle that had been patched in on emergency channel the instant the Bureau's regional office made contact with local dispatch. Corrigan heard the engines before he saw them. He was still standing over Denise, radio in hand, sunglasses pushed up on his head now, sweat darkening the collar of his uniform, when 3 vehicles skidded to a stop on the gravel shoulder in a cloud of dust that hadn't even settled from his own cruiser's arrival. Doors opened in unison. Agents stepped out, vests marked FBI in bold yellow letters, hands near their sides but not drawn, the calm, practiced posture of people who had done this 100 times and knew exactly how to de-escalate a scene that had already gone wrong. A tall man in his 40s, badge already visible on a chain around his neck, walked straight toward Corrigan without hurry, without hesitation. "Special Agent Marcus Webb, Atlanta Field Office. I need you to step away from Agent Carver right now." Corrigan blinked. "Agent what?" "Agent Carver," Webb repeated, slower this time, the way a person repeats something to someone who clearly hadn't understood it the first time and needed to understand it now. 12-year veteran of this bureau. She triggered an emergency distress signal 11 minutes ago indicating a weapon had been drawn on her during a traffic stop. Step away from her. She showed me a badge. I couldn't verify. You didn't try to verify it," Webb said. "Dispatch has no record of you calling anything in. Step away from her." Corrigan's hand fell away from Denise's shoulder as if it had turned to fire. One of the other agents knelt beside her immediately, checking the cuffs, murmuring something low and steady, unlocking them with a small key that clicked free in seconds. Denise sat up slowly, gravel imprinted red into her cheek, wrists raw, and for the first time since the gun had come up, she allowed herself a single long breath. The agent beside her, a younger woman named Priya Anand, handed her a bottle of water still cold from the SUV's cooler. "You're safe, Agent Carver. We've got you." Denise nodded, wiping the grit from her palms. Watching the small crowd that had gathered near the gas station, across the highway, phones raised faces, caught somewhere between shock and grim recognition. The particular look of people who had seen a version of this story before, but never this close, never with this ending waiting to be written. She heard Corrigan's voice rising behind her, pleading now instead of ordering. "I need everyone to understand I was following protocol." She reached into her jacket. "I had no way of knowing." "She told you what she was doing before she did it," Webb said, cutting through the excuse with the flat, unhurried authority of a man who had heard 100 versions of the same defense and stopped finding any of them persuasive years ago. "That's not ambiguity, officer. That's a warning you chose not to hear." Corrigan stood frozen, gun still holstered now, but hand hovering near it out of pure reflex, watching his entire version of events dissolve in real time in front of federal witnesses, a dash cam. And he would soon learn his own body camera, which had been recording the entire encounter from the moment he'd stepped out of his cruiser. "I was following procedure," he stammered. "She wouldn't cooperate." She reached into her jacket. "She told you clearly and calmly that she was reaching for identification," Webb said. "That's on your own body camera audio. You drew your weapon on a federal agent who had already announced her intent and was moving slowly and visibly. That is not procedure, officer. That is a felony." By now, the Caldwell County Sheriff's supervisor had arrived, a heavy-set man named Ruiz who looked, from the moment he stepped out of his vehicle, like a man whose day had just gotten immeasurably worse. He walked straight to Corrigan, ignoring his sputtering explanations, and asked for his body camera footage to be pulled immediately. What came next unfolded over the following 90 minutes on the shoulder of Highway 9, in the relentless Georgia heat, with the pine trees swaying and cicadas screaming, and a small crowd of onlookers gathering at a safe distance near the gas station across the road. The body camera footage, played back on a tablet screen in the shade of Webb's SUV, told a story with no ambiguity in it at all. Denise's calm, clear announcement, her slow movement, her badge plainly visible, plainly legible, Corrigan's laugh, his refusal to verify. The gun, rising in his trembling hand, aimed at a woman who had done everything exactly right. "I want to be very clear about what I'm seeing," Ruiz said, his voice tight with something between fury and disbelief as he watched the footage a second time. "You had a legitimate federal credential presented to you, clearly and without threat, and your response was to draw your service weapon and then falsify your radio report calling it fraudulent." "I panicked," Corrigan said, and for the first time his voice had lost all of its earlier swagger. Nobody's ever shown me a badge like that out here. I didn't know what to think." "You didn't think," Webb said quietly. "That's the problem. You saw a black woman in sweatpants driving an older car, and your mind supplied the story before she ever opened her mouth. Everything after that was just you working backward to justify a conclusion you'd already reached." It was Ruiz who delivered the next piece of information, and it was the piece that turned a bad traffic stop into something far larger. "Agent Carver," Ruiz said, turning to Denise, who now stood with a bottle of water someone had handed her, wrists still marked red from the cuffs. "I need to tell you something, and I suspect it's going to be relevant to whatever comes next. This isn't Officer Corrigan's first complaint." Denise's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes sharpened. In the last 2 years, Ruiz continued, this department has received 11 formal complaints about traffic stops along this stretch of highway, all involving Black or Hispanic drivers, all alleging stops without valid cause, several alleging drawn weapons over routine documentation issues. Every single one was closed as unfounded by the previous review board. Officer Corrigan was the responding officer in 9 of those 11 stops. Webb's expression darkened. He glanced at Denise, and something passed between them, the recognition of 2 investigators realizing, at the same moment, that the case they thought they understood had just become something else entirely. Because Denise Carver had not arrived in Caldwell County by accident that week. The investigation she had been quietly building for 4 months, the one she had told no one about outside her direct supervisor. The one connected to a pattern or practice review the Civil Rights Division had opened into 3 rural counties along the Highway 9 corridor, had Caldwell County at its center. She had been planning to meet with the sheriff's office the following week, in her official capacity, to present preliminary findings. Instead, she had become one of the findings herself. "You have got to be joking," Corrigan said, his face draining of color as the weight of what Ruiz had just said settled over him. "You're telling me she's the Fed investigating us?" "I'm telling you," Webb said, "that you just drew a weapon on the lead investigator in a federal civil rights inquiry into your own department's pattern of unlawful stops, and you did it on camera, and you falsified your radio report while doing it." The silence that followed was the kind that presses against the ears, the kind that makes a person hear their own pulse. "I want a lawyer," Corrigan said finally, quietly, all the earlier bravado gone from his voice like water through cracked earth. "You'll have every right to one," Webb said. "But before we go any further, I want you to understand exactly what happened here today, because I don't think you do yet. You saw a woman who didn't fit what you expected a federal agent to look like, and instead of doing your job, you let that assumption make every decision for you. You didn't verify her credentials because some part of you had already decided they couldn't be real. That's not a mistake, officer. That's a choice you've apparently made 9 times before today, and today it happened to catch up with you." Corrigan said nothing. There was nothing left to say that the footage hadn't already answered. Ruiz, standing a few feet away, ran a hand over his face, looking suddenly older than he had 20 minutes earlier. 11 complaints," he said quietly, almost to himself. 11, and we sat on every one of them. I've got some hard questions to ask my own review board tonight." "You will," Webb said, "and you'll have federal auditors sitting across the table from you while you ask them." "You'll have every right to one," Webb said. "You're being placed under arrest for deprivation of rights under color of law, a federal offense under Title 18, Section 242, along with state charges for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and falsifying an official report. Sheriff's Deputy Ruiz will also be initiating an internal affairs review, effective immediately." They cuffed him then the same steel that had bitten into Denise's wrists 20 minutes earlier, and walked him to the back of his own cruiser, while the gathered onlookers across the road watched in stunned silence, phones raised. Recording a moment that would be on local news by nightfall and national news by the following morning, Ruiz turned to Denise, his voice heavy with something close to shame. "Agent Carver, on behalf of this department, I owe you an apology I can't begin to make big enough." "You can make it big enough," Denise said quietly, "by making sure the other 11 complaints get reopened, by making sure this isn't the last consequence anyone in this department faces." "They will be," Ruiz said. "I'll see to it personally, starting today." Word moved quickly through Caldwell County over the following weeks, the way word does in small towns where everyone is 3 phone calls away from everyone else. The Department of Justice announced a formal pattern or practice investigation into the Caldwell County Sheriff's Office within 72 hours, citing the Highway 9 stops as a central piece of evidence. 3 other officers were placed on administrative leave pending review. The sheriff, facing mounting pressure and a wave of resurfaced complaints from residents who had stayed silent for years out of fear or exhaustion, announced his resignation less than a month later. What made the story spread the way it did wasn't only the badge, or the gun, or the 4 minutes it took federal backup to arrive. It was what investigators found once they started pulling the thread. Buried in the department's records management system, auditors from the Bureau's inspection division discovered that nearly a third of Corrigan's traffic stop reports over the past 3 years had been altered after the fact, timestamps adjusted, reasons for the stop rewritten to match outcomes rather than the other way around. In 4 separate cases, dash camera footage that should have existed had simply vanished from department servers, flagged in internal logs as corrupted on dates that lined up suspiciously with civilian complaints. It wasn't just one officer's bad judgment on one bad afternoon. It was a pattern that had been quietly protected, report after report, complaint after dismissed complaint, by a review process that had never once looked hard enough to find what was right in front of it. Denise's preliminary findings, the ones she had planned to present formally the following week, became the backbone of a federal case that grew far larger than anyone expected on that gravel shoulder. Prosecutors would later say that without her stop, without her own body being the evidence, the pattern might have taken another 2 years and another dozen complaints to surface. Instead, it took one man's refusal to believe a badge in front of his own face. Corrigan was indicted on federal civil rights charges within 6 weeks, the body camera footage playing a central role in the grand jury proceedings. He was suspended without pay, then formally terminated once the department's internal review concluded, its findings scathing in a way that left no room for the excuses he had once relied on. His attorney would later argue confusion, stress, the pressures of small-town policing. None of it moved the footage. None of it undid the audio of his own voice, laughing at a badge that was never fake at a woman who had never once raised her voice. At a truth he simply hadn't wanted to believe because believing it meant admitting he'd been wrong about her from the very first second he saw her face through a car window. Denise didn't attend most of the hearings that followed. That work belonged to others now, to prosecutors, to the Civil Rights Division, to a system that, however slowly, however imperfectly, had done exactly what it was built to do when someone finally gave it the evidence to work with. What she did, 3 hours after the cuffs came off her wrists on the shoulder of Highway 9, was get back into her dented gray Honda, start the engine, and finish the drive she had started that morning. The hospital in Brantley County smelled like antiseptic and overcooked coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed steadily down the corridor as Denise walked, her wrists still faintly bruised beneath her sleeves, her badge back in her jacket pocket where it belonged. She found her mother's room at the end of the hall, the door half open, the soft murmur of a television turned low. Her mother looked up from the pillow, eyes brightening despite the exhaustion etched into her face. "There's my girl." Denise crossed the room and took her mother's hand, feeling the familiar papery warmth of it, and for a long moment she didn't say anything at all. She just breathed, in, out. The kind of breath a person only fully takes once real danger has passed and the body finally allows itself to believe it. "You look tired," her mother said. "Long drive," Denise said, and left it at that. There would be time later to explain the rest. The gravel, the gun, the badge that had almost gotten her killed by a man who mistook calm for weakness and black womanhood for guilt. For now, there was only her mother's hand in hers, and the low hum of the hospital lights, and the quiet, hard-won relief of simply being alive to hold it. She sat with her mother long after visiting hours technically ended, a kind nurse pretending not to notice, and somewhere in that quiet room, between the beeping monitors and her mother's soft, steady breathing, Denise let herself feel the full weight of what had almost happened on that gravel shoulder. Not the professional weight, that would come later, in reports and depositions and long meetings with the Civil Rights Division. This was the other weight, the human one, the simple truth that she had been seconds away from becoming another name on a list nobody wanted to add to. She held her mother's hand a little tighter, grateful in a way that had nothing to do with badges or investigations, and everything to do with simply being there, alive, in that fluorescent-lit room, when it mattered. There is a particular kind of danger that hides inside certainty. The certainty a person feels when they've decided, before any evidence, exactly who deserves respect and who doesn't. Officer Wade Corrigan had built an entire career on that certainty, stop after stop, complaint after dismissed complaint, until the day it collided with a woman who happened to be exactly what he refused to believe she could be. Power that has never been questioned rarely survives its first honest test, and the people who wield it carelessly are almost always the last to see the reckoning coming, because they've spent so long assuming the ground beneath them would never shift. It shifted on a stretch of Highway 9 in the space of 2 minutes in front of a body camera that never lies. If this story moved you, hit like and subscribe, because there are more stories like this one coming. Drop a comment and tell us, what would you have done in Denise's position? Do you think Corrigan's punishment fit what he did? And have you ever witnessed someone abuse their power over someone they underestimated? Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the truth always catches up, and we'll see you in the next story.